In 1939, in London, a school teacher named Vera was looking for a way to earn extra money. A job agency told her about an unusual offer, but the pay was too good to ignore. A wealthy married couple known as the Owens had sent a letter asking Vera to work for them as an assistant and secretary. The job would take place at their home on a remote island called Soldier Island, off the coast of Devon. The salary was exceptionally high, and if things went well, the position could even become permanent. Vera accepted without hesitation. Shortly after, Vera took a train to the port. When she arrived, she found 5 other guests waiting at the same spot. All of them were taken across the water by a boatman named Narracott, who had been hired specifically by the wealthy couple. After a long journey over the sea, they finally arrived at Soldier Island, where they were greeted by 2 house servants, Thomas and Ethel, who had also been hired by the mysterious Owens. The 6 visitors were then led to a large mansion sitting in the middle of an open grassy field. Once inside, they discovered that 2 more guests had already arrived before them, bringing the total number of people on the island to 10. Among them was Vera Claythorne, the teacher hired to work as the Owens secretary. There was also Philip Lombard, an explorer, Wargrave, a judge, Blore, a detective, Armstrong, a doctor, MacArthur, a general, Brent, a deeply religious woman known for her strict moral views on raising children, Marston, a reckless young man from a wealthy family, and the 2 servants, Thomas and Ethel. As everyone settled into their rooms, each person revealed something about their character through their actions. Brent quietly drank her tea. MacArthur stared at an old photo of his wife. Marston casually used drugs. Dr. Armstrong's hands trembled noticeably. Wargrave took medication for his illness, and Philip Lombard quietly slipped a gun into his drawer. In every room, there was also a poem called 10 Little Soldiers, an unsettling nursery rhyme about soldiers who die one by one. Later, after everyone dressed for dinner, the group gathered for an elegant meal prepared by Thomas and Ethel, while they all waited for the Owens to finally appear as their hosts. In the center of the dining table sat 10 small soldier figurines. Seeing them, everyone immediately remembered that old childhood song. The same poem was posted throughout the entire house, including inside their bedrooms. And this is how the story of And Then There Were None begins. During dinner, as the 8 guests talked, Wargrave spoke proudly about his 40 years in the law and the many important people he had met. Armstrong revealed he had once served as a military doctor, while General MacArthur mentioned he knew of Mr. Owen through his time studying military history, though he had never actually seen the man's face. MacArthur explained that UN Owen stood for Ulick Norman Owen. However, Vera found this strange, because the woman who hired her had also used the initials UN Owen, supposedly for a Nancy Owen. It seemed far too convenient for a husband and wife to share the exact same initials. Brent then asked when they would finally meet the Owens, but Thomas explained there was no telephone on the island to reach them. According to him, Narracott brought letters and supplies every morning, so perhaps the couple would arrive with him the next day. At that moment, Armstrong recalled something that had happened on the way to the port. Marston had driven recklessly and nearly sideswiped Armstrong's car. The 2 had already argued over it, and the others had to step in to calm things down, reminding them that there were ladies present and that gentlemen settle things properly. In the end, Marston softened his attitude and shook Armstrong's hand as an apology. But just as dinner was wrapping up, a sudden voice boomed through the entire room. The voice accused all 10 people of murder, naming them one by one. Armstrong was accused of killing a woman named Louie. Brent was blamed for the death of Beatrice. Blore was accused over Landor, Vera over Cyril, Lombard over the deaths of 21 members of an East African tribe, MacArthur over Henry, Marston over Johnny and Lucy, Wargrave over Seaton, and finally, Thomas and Ethel were accused over the death of Brady. Whoever had brought them to that island clearly knew everything about them, and this was only the beginning. In a panic, everyone ran to find the source of the voice. The search led them to the lower part of the house, where they discovered a gramophone connected to speakers placed throughout the mansion. The message was not being said live. It was a pre-recorded message set to play at a specific time. At the same moment, Ethel suddenly collapsed in the kitchen. Thomas quickly took her to her room, and Armstrong gave her a mild sedative to help her rest. But as Armstrong left, he could hear Ethel sounding terrified, while Thomas harshly ordered her to stay quiet. Shortly after, Thomas was forced to explain what he knew about the Owens. The truth was even stranger. Neither he nor Ethel had ever met them. Both had been hired through letters and were given instructions to play that recording at a specific time, supposedly as part of a surprise. The same was true for all the other guests. No one had ever seen the Owens. Then Thomas revealed something much darker. He and Ethel had once worked for an elderly woman named Mrs. Brady, whom they treated almost like family. But when she left them almost nothing in her will, Thomas smothered her to death with a pillow. After that, one by one, the others began to reveal their own pasts. Armstrong admitted that a patient named Lewis had died during a risky operation. MacArthur confessed that Henry, a young soldier under his command, died on a mission that MacArthur himself had assigned him. Wargrave insisted that Seaton had been justly executed for his crimes. Blore explained that Landor, a criminal and drunkard, had died after choking on his own vomit following an arrest. Vera then recalled Cyril, a boy she had once looked after. One day, Cyril went swimming without her knowledge and drowned. Vera claimed she had tried to save him, though she couldn't swim, and nearly lost her own life in the process. Then there was Lombard, the only one who showed no remorse at all. He openly admitted to killing 21 people for his own benefit. He even called out the others for hiding behind excuses and pretending their actions had been accidents or simple misunderstandings. He also pointed out that Brent hadn't confessed to anything, while Marston could barely even remember his victims. The tension spiked immediately, but Wargrave stepped in and restored order. He proposed that everyone leave the island together the following morning when Narracott returned. Later that same night, as everyone prepared to sleep, Marston suddenly remembered Johnny and Lucy, two children he had once hit with his car. Instead of taking responsibility, he had blamed their parents for not watching them closely enough. Armstrong, still shaken by everything happening around him, found Marston's attitude cruel. Then, without any warning, Marston collapsed. He began choking violently on his drink, coughing up blood as he died in front of everyone. When they searched his body, Lombard, Armstrong, and Blore found drugs among his belongings. At first, it seemed possible that something Marston had consumed was connected to his sudden death. That night, as everyone tried to sleep, Ethel was tormented by a disturbing dream. In it, she relived the moment Thomas had killed Mrs. Brady, a memory that had left her deeply traumatized. For a long time, Ethel had lived in fear, forced to stay silent by Thomas. Shortly after, Ethel suddenly woke up. Someone knocked on her door, then entered. The next morning, before dawn, Thomas urgently woke Armstrong and asked him to check on Ethel. Something felt wrong. When Armstrong examined her, the truth became clear. Ethel had been dead for several hours. When Vera found out, she immediately brought Armstrong to the dining room and pointed out something chilling. The number of soldier figurines on the table had dropped from 10 to 8. To her, it was a clear signal that the deaths were following the rhyme. Armstrong dismissed it, thinking Vera was reading too much into things. As Armstrong walked away, Vera began having vivid hallucinations. She saw Cyril's mother on the beach, warning her son not to swim. Then Hugo, Cyril's uncle, appeared, dragging her back into memories of her past. Meanwhile, Blore and Lombard took a closer look at Marston's body. When they checked his breath, they caught the unmistakable smell of cyanide. That confirmed it was no accident. Marston had not choked on his own. Someone had poisoned his drink at dinner. Now more shaken by Ethel's death, Vera asked if anyone had moved the soldier figurines. No one admitted to it. She then pointed out how the deaths matched the nursery rhyme perfectly. One victim had drowned, another had died in their sleep, and now the number of figurines had dropped to match those deaths. Suspicion quickly turned toward Armstrong. He had access to medicine, he had treated Ethel, and he'd already had a conflict with Marston before. Accusations started flying and the tension at the table exploded. Armstrong, clearly offended, allowed everyone to search his luggage, but insisted they also search Wargrave's, since the judge was also carrying medication for his illness. Both bags were examined, but nothing suspicious was found, only ordinary medicine. Vera apologized, but Armstrong was furious at how he had been treated. He stormed off, demanding to know who they thought he was. Later, Vera questioned Lombard about his past. Without hesitation, he explained that he had once stolen diamonds from an African tribe, and admitted there were many more people he had killed for personal gain. Elsewhere, General MacArthur sat alone, lost in his thoughts. He remembered the day Henry died. That death had not simply been a casualty of war, as he had once claimed. The truth was far darker. Henry had been shot, and MacArthur had been responsible, with still no sign of the Owens, and Thomas claiming he had been on the island for a week without ever seeing them. Lombard began forming a theory. He believed the Owens might be hiding somewhere along the rocky coastline. So he and Blore went to investigate. They searched beneath the cliffs and among the rocks, but found absolutely nothing. There was no sign of anyone else on the island. After combing the coastline and coming up empty, Lombard and Blore returned to the house and ran into Armstrong. Shortly after, a sudden noise came from Marston's room. Lombard immediately thought it could be Owen and quickly grabbed his gun before opening the door. But instead of uncovering a hidden mastermind, they found Thomas pulling a tent from under the bed. He planned to sleep elsewhere rather than share a room with a corpse. With still no rescue in sight, the group began packing their belongings and waiting for Narracotte's return. Thomas stayed behind, still bound by his contract, while General MacArthur seemed convinced that no one was ever coming. After a brief encounter with MacArthur near the cliff, Vera returned to the house and noticed Wargrave sunbathing calmly outside. She then spent some time talking with Brent, who finally revealed her own past. Beatrice had been a war orphan who worked as a maid for Brent. When Beatrice became pregnant outside of marriage, Brent, guided by her strict religious beliefs, threw her out of the house. Desperate and completely alone, Beatrice took her own life by throwing herself in front of a train. As Vera went back inside the mansion, Blore, who was nearby, noticed a group of birds circling near the cliff. Something felt wrong, so he went to investigate. When he arrived, he found MacArthur's body. The general had been murdered, struck with a heavy object. When Vera learned of his death, she immediately checked the figurines on the dining table. Just as she had feared, one more had disappeared. Only 7 remained. The pattern was continuing exactly as the rhyme described. The group gathered again, trying to make sense of who Owen really was. Blore then revealed that Lombard was carrying a gun. Lombard explained that he had received instructions by letter to bring it as a precaution in case problems arose on the island. He had essentially been hired as protection. They soon realized that all of them had been invited through the same agency, arranged by a man named Isaac Morris. Wargrave then began questioning why each of them had agreed to come. He himself had been invited under the pretense of meeting an old acquaintance, and was told the island would be good for his health. Brent had been invited to educate children who did not exist. Blore had been hired to watch someone hiding a secret, and had also been given a full list of the guests. Armstrong had been brought there to treat a supposedly sick wife. Then Wargrave pointed out something deeply unsettling. The names Ulick Norman Owen and Nancy Owen both shared the same initials, UN Owen. Spoken together, they sounded like unknown. That realization changed everything. Wargrave concluded that Lombard had been right about one thing. The killer was indeed on the island, but not hiding outside. The killer was inside the house, and had to be one of them. Suspicion immediately fell on Thomas. He moved silently, had access to every room, and Armstrong had even heard him threatening Ethel the night before. But Lombard refused to believe Thomas was responsible. He insisted there had to be someone else, an 11th person hidden somewhere on the island, and he was determined to find them and kill them. Not long after, Thomas called everyone for dinner, but by then, trust had completely broken down. Some refused to eat, afraid the food had been poisoned. As the day ended and Narracott still hadn't appeared, it became undeniable. They were completely isolated. With no other option, everyone retreated to their rooms. Fear took hold. Suspicion grew stronger. One by one they closed their doors, alone with their thoughts, knowing the killer was still among them. Not even that was enough to keep them safe. The next morning, chaos erupted. Armstrong suddenly struck the gong to wake everyone up. When he went to get his morning coffee, he found Thomas dead in a horrifying state. His body had been brutally cut open, matching the next line of the nursery rhyme. 7 little soldiers chopping up sticks. One chopped himself in half, and then there were 6. In that moment, Armstrong understood the truth. Whoever had brought them there was playing a twisted game, following the rhyme step by step. Still, he tried to convince himself that it could stop there, because the next verse mentioned a bee sting, and there didn't seem to be any bees on the island. Vera snapped him out of his panic with a firm slap, forcing everyone to keep it together. Lombard and Blore then moved Thomas's body to the bedroom, placing it next to Ethel, while they cleaned the area where he had been found. Meanwhile, Armstrong approached Wargrave in the dining room and suggested they work together, admitting he no longer trusted the others. Shortly after, Armstrong left to keep an eye on Vera, who was preparing drinks. Brent refused to touch anything Vera made, worried it might be poisoned. At that point, everyone began drifting apart and moving on their own. Then, as Vera passed through the dining room on her way to her bedroom, she froze. The figurines had changed again. Only 5 remained. Vera immediately struck the gong to call everyone back, and once again, the pattern continued. The next victim was Brent. She had been poisoned in a way that resembled a bee sting, matching the rhyme perfectly. After carrying her body to her room, the panic spread even further. Lombard ran back to his bedroom and discovered something even worse. His gun was gone. That changed everything. It meant someone had access to a spare key, most likely one that had belonged to Thomas. Accusations exploded immediately. Lombard suspected Armstrong, since Armstrong was the one who had found Thomas's body. Armstrong shot back, pointing out that Lombard had also handled the body afterward. Blore joined in, pointing the finger at Lombard, but Lombard quickly turned the suspicion back on Blore, arguing that Blore had been the last one to arrive at the scene. Lombard even laid out a theory. Blore could have taken the spare key, gone back to his room, waited for everyone else to gather, and then slipped away to steal the gun. Blore denied everything. He claimed he had been delayed because he had been in the bathroom for quite some time. With no clear answers, the 5 of them decided to search the entire house. They went through every room, every corner, every possible hiding spot. They tore apart furniture, ripped open cushions, and checked everything they could, but the spare key and the gun were nowhere to be found. In the end, they were left with nothing but canned food and an ever-deepening paranoia. They sat together, exchanging suspicious glances, each one silently wondering who among them was the killer. The truth was far closer than any of them imagined. The missing key and gun had been hidden somewhere no one would ever think to look, inside the mouth of a bearskin rug. Outside, heavy rain was falling. The electricity was still cut off, and 5 bodies lay inside the house. The atmosphere had become suffocating. Fear had completely taken over. To prevent another murder, they agreed on a strict rule. No one moves alone unless absolutely necessary. Either they stay together as a group, or only one person moves at a time. That night, they ate a simple meal and sat together, trying to make sense of it all. Lombard began pressing Wargrave about his past. Slowly, it became clear that over the years, Wargrave had sentenced many people to death. And not only that, he always stayed to personally witness the executions. To him, that was part of his responsibility. The conversation then shifted to a man named Edward Seaton, who had once been declared innocent by the press. Wargrave firmly insisted that Seaton was guilty. According to him, there had been undeniable evidence, including a personal notebook filled with disturbing thoughts that revealed Seaton's true nature. Seaton had tortured and killed his victims in brutal ways, even leaving clues to guide the police, as though he enjoyed being hunted. On the day of his execution, Seaton refused to wear a hood. He showed no fear. If anything, he seemed to be mocking justice itself. Even now, Wargrave admitted the memory of Seaton still lingered in his mind. After that conversation, everyone sat together in one room, trying to stay close. Only Wargrave separated himself, choosing to sit alone in another room, convinced that nothing would happen if just one person stepped away. But the moment Wargrave left, suspicion crept back in. Lombard and Blore began questioning him. To them, Wargrave shared the same mindset as the killer, someone who believed they had the right to punish the guilty. Blore even suggested that Wargrave, being alone, could be setting up the next murder. Vera, exhausted from the constant fear and accusations, decided to go back to her room. She told the others they could watch her if they wanted to. She simply couldn't take the pressure anymore. Alone in her bedroom, her mind began to fall apart. Memories of her past came flooding back. She thought about her relationship with Hugo, Cyril's uncle, and how far things had gone between them. The guilt she had buried for so long began rising back to the surface. Soon, her fear spiraled completely out of control. Vera started seeing Cyril everywhere, feeling as though something was suffocating her. Overwhelmed, she collapsed. Her scream brought the others running to her room. Lombard, Blore, and Armstrong rushed in and helped her regain consciousness. Afterward, one by one, each of them stepped briefly out of the room on different pretexts. Armstrong went for medicine, Blore went for a drink, Lombard went for wine to calm her down. When they came back together, something odd caught their attention. There was a hook in the ceiling of Vera's room, something that didn't exist in any of the other bedrooms. Then they noticed something even more disturbing. Wargrave had not returned. Despite the fact that Vera's scream had echoed through the entire house, he never appeared. They went to check on him, and once again, the worst had happened. Wargrave was found dead, shot in the head. His body had been staged with a judge's wig placed on top of him. They moved his body to his room. Now, only 3 men and Vera remained, and as before, suspicion exploded immediately. All of them had left Vera's room briefly, so each one had an opportunity, but no one could prove anything. The pattern continued perfectly. The rhyme had mentioned a courtroom, and now Wargrave, the judge, was dead. Only 4 remained, and the figurines reflected exactly that number. With fear and hopelessness taking over, the group began losing their grip. The pressure was so intense that some turned to alcohol and drugs, trying to numb themselves, to escape, even briefly, from the nightmare they were trapped in. As the tension pushed them further toward the edge, they began drinking heavily, trying to dull the fear that now dominated the house. In the middle of that frantic state, Armstrong suggested something unsettling. He pointed to what seemed like a closeness between Lombard and Vera, hinting that maybe the 2 of them were actually the mysterious Mr. and Mrs. Owen. After a while, everyone went back to their rooms. However, Lombard, still caught up in the charged atmosphere, went to Vera's room and moved closer to her. At the same time, Blore heard footsteps outside. When he checked the stairs, he realized it was Armstrong, moving in a suspicious manner. Blore immediately went to warn Lombard, now convinced that Armstrong was the real killer. Vera was told to stay in her room and lock the door, while Lombard and Blore went out to find Armstrong. Left alone again, Vera's mind drifted back to the past. After Cyril's death, the guilt and trauma had pushed her to the breaking point. She had even been committed to a mental institution. Hugo visited her there, and afterward decided to take Cyril's mother away, hoping the distance would help her heal. Vera had once begged Hugo to stay with her, but he chose to return to his own life, leaving her behind. Meanwhile, Lombard and Blore searched the entire island, but Armstrong was nowhere. When they returned to the mansion, something felt even more off. The soldier figurines had dropped to 3, and inexplicably, Lombard's missing gun was now back on his bed. Suspicion surged again. Lombard and Blore started accusing each other because during the search they had split up. Either one of them could have killed Armstrong, but Vera saw it differently. She recalled the next line of the rhyme. 4 little soldiers going out to sea, a red herring swallowed one, and then there were 3. To Vera, the phrase red herring suggested deception. Maybe Armstrong wasn't actually dead. Maybe he was hiding somewhere. After all, Armstrong had previously suggested playing music to calm everyone down. That could have been the perfect opportunity to carry out another murder, including Wargrave's. Suspicion against Armstrong grew stronger. Then Blore finally admitted the truth about his own past. Landor had not died by accident. Blore had killed him, stamping him to death. With that confession out in the open, they came up with a desperate plan. They would find Armstrong and kill him before he could strike again. They also planned to light a bonfire on the cliff at night, hoping someone out at sea might see it and come to rescue them. Without wasting time, Vera and Lombard packed their things and headed toward the cliff. Blore, convinced that Armstrong was still inside the house, decided to stay behind, ready to confront him. Time passed. When Blore didn't return, Vera and Lombard grew worried. Lombard told Vera to wait while he went back to the house to check, but the rhyme kept fulfilling itself. 3 little soldiers went to the zoo. A big bear hugged one, and then there were 2. Blore was found dead, brutally crushed, his body wrapped inside a bearskin rug. Now only Vera and Lombard remained. Desperate, they searched the island one last time, trying to find Armstrong. Finally, Vera spotted something near the rocks. When they got closer, they found the truth. It was Armstrong's body. That meant he had never been the killer. With just the 2 of them left, the situation became even more dangerous. Lombard began to believe there had to be an 11th person hidden on the island. But Vera started thinking differently. Lombard had gone back to the house before her. He had had the opportunity to kill Blore. In that moment, with no one else to trust, Vera seized her chance and grabbed the gun. Now it was just the 2 of them, face to face, each convinced the other was the killer. Lombard tried to take the gun back, telling Vera he needed it, but she acted immediately. She fired several shots and killed him on the spot. At first, Vera felt something like relief. In her mind, the killer was finally dead, but that feeling didn't last. The guilt she had carried for so long began surfacing again, stronger than ever. Her thoughts returned to the trial and to how she had managed to escape all the accusations, because the truth was far darker than anything she had said. Vera hadn't simply failed to save Cyril, she had let him drown on purpose. Her plan had been calculated. If Cyril died, his wealthy mother would leave everything to Hugo, and if Hugo inherited that fortune, Vera believed she could marry him and live a life of luxury. But everything fell apart. Hugo eventually figured out what Vera had done. Disgusted by her actions, he walked away from her completely. Without any proof, he couldn't expose her, but his hatred for her was obvious. That rejection destroyed Vera. The guilt, the heartbreak, and the collapse of her plan drove her to a mental institution. Now alone on the island, Vera convinced herself that it was finally over. She felt safe. She walked back to the mansion with a strange sense of calm, even imagining Cyril walking beside her. But the moment she entered her room, everything changed. The hook in the ceiling, which had been empty before, now held a rope. Beneath it sat a carefully placed chair. Vera's fragile mind began to crack. Overwhelmed by guilt and haunted by memories of Hugo, she slowly gave in to the suggestion that someone had planted in her mind. Almost without realizing it, she climbed onto the chair and placed the rope around her neck. Then the door opened. In her unstable state, Vera thought it was Hugo, but the truth was far more terrifying. Wargrave was alive. The man they had all trusted as just another victim had been orchestrating everything from the very beginning. Earlier, when Armstrong had asked to work together, Wargrave used that opportunity to manipulate him. He faked his own death using a false gunshot wound, knowing that Armstrong would convince the others to move his body without conducting a proper examination. It had all been part of the plan. Later that same night, Wargrave lured Armstrong outside, claiming he had seen something near the shore. It was a trap. Armstrong was killed to fit the next line of the rhyme. Every single death had been carefully executed. No one had suspected the frail old judge. Now, with Vera as the final piece of his game, Wargrave revealed his true motive. He wanted to judge those who had escaped justice, but beyond that, he wanted to create something unforgettable. Inspired by the twisted mind of Seaton, Wargrave had designed his masterpiece, a perfect crime. A sequence of murders carried out with precision, leaving behind only bodies and no clear killer. His obsession ran even deeper. Since childhood, Wargrave had felt a strange satisfaction in witnessing death. After 40 years of sentencing people to die, his mind had been shaped entirely by this idea of justice and punishment. And now, facing a terminal illness, he chose to end his life by creating one final, extraordinary act. A case that would baffle the world. A mystery no one could ever solve. From the very beginning, Wargrave had chosen Vera to be the last survivor. She was the most fragile, the most tormented, and the easiest to break. The rope in her room had been prepared in advance. As Vera struggled and begged for mercy, Wargrave showed none. He kicked away the chair, and Vera became the final victim. With his plan complete, Wargrave walked calmly to the dining room, wiped the gun clean to remove his fingerprints, then carefully positioned it. Finally, he pulled the trigger under his chin, sending the gun flying across the room so it would appear as though someone else had shot him. And with that, his masterpiece was finished. 10 people were brought to an isolated island, 10 bodies were left behind, and no killer was ever found. So the moral of the story is simple. If a rich stranger invites you to a creepy island with no phone, a murder poem in every bedroom, and 10 little statues on the dinner table, maybe just stay home.